Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Kendrick. Hello, everybody. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. It has been extremely hot over the last few days. I am baking. I was not made for this weather. I just wasn't. I am more of a fall, winter kind of person. I don't necessarily like it to be cold, but I like it to be wetter than it is right now. The rain, I love the rain. I typically prefer to run in the rain. I prefer to walk in the rain. I like driving in the rain. I like listening to it, the smell of it, everything about it. Heat and me just don't get along. I don't really think I could live in a place like Texas. I don't think I could. I like going to Vegas for a short period of time. I don't think I could live in Vegas. I don't think I could live where it's just deserts and cacti. You know, I much rather prefer to live in Washington. Washington State it's everything here. It's mainly cold, not cold, but it's mainly wet throughout the year. And then the summers, while they're unbearable, at least for me, they aren't as warm as they are in some other places. So I just know that if I can't really stand Washington heat, if I can't stand the Washington summers, places down south, the places, I would not survive there. I just wouldn't. I wouldn't be able to do it. I'd bake alive. Literally. Anyways, so we got some stuff to talk about today. We're going to talk about the NFL and basically the COVID concerns. A lot of players opting out. The Marlins, they ended up having a COVID outbreak, and I think that is what has sparked a lot of the concern. We're going to get into that. Some Chiefs players have been speaking out about what they believe that they're going to do Super Bowl-wise over the next few years. I'm going to talk about that a little bit. The NFL Top 100 rankings have been coming out over the last few days, and I have some thoughts about that. So we're going to get into that because that is just that is a mess. And then I'm going to give you guys my top 10 wide receivers in the NFL, and I will explain later on in the show about why it is that I'm doing my wide receiver rankings. But anyways, so it was announced a couple of days ago that the Marlins, their game was actually canceled because they had 14 members of the team and coaches test positive for COVID-19. And so with their home opener against Baltimore having been canceled, this has sparked a lot of questions about what is this going to do to the NFL? Because obviously the NBA, they have a bubble and they tested over 300 players. All of them came back negative. Now, did some people go into the bubble testing positive? Yes, I think Russell Westbrook went in and he had tested positive. Some other guys, they tested positive. But at this point in time, nobody there has tested positive. And while guys like Lou Williams is currently in quarantine because he decided to go to a gentleman's club, and certain guys have been leaving the bubble for family emergencies, whatever it might be, for the most part, the NBA's plan has been working. I believe, if anything, we're going to get the NBA season. I just have a real question about these other sports. Now, as far as I know, the MLB is not planning on halting their season, but the Marlins are currently under quarantine, and they need to figure all that stuff out. But of course, this has then drawn comparisons to the NFL, because the NFL is the other big sport in America that has not done any talks about a bubble. There's just no chance for the bubble. And the main reason why is because there's just simply too many people. As I said, there's over, about 200 people per team when you take in the entire staff, including the players. So just a bubble for 200 people per team, and there's 32 teams. It's just not going to happen, right? It doesn't make any logical sense. That would be so much money to even attempt to do the bubble. That's so many people you have to worry about. And so players recently have been taking their opportunities to opt out. To name a few players that have opted out, Laurent Duvernay-Tardif, who I talked about in my last podcast, he of course opted out. Dante Hightower with the Patriots opted out. Marcus Cannon opted out. Eddie Goldman, Marquise Goodwin, Michael Pierce, Patrick Chung, Star Lotulelei. That's just to name a few of the players, a few of the more notable players who have opted out. Some of these players, it's their first year with the team. They're not going to be there their first year with the team. They're going to be sitting at home. Some of these other players, they got signed in free agency, and now they're not even going to play the first year of their new contract. It's a big deal, and I think the Patriots so far have been hit the hardest. I believe that 5 or 6 of their players have opted out, and I did see there was a very interesting, I saw this interesting tweet, I can't remember who it was from, but apparently there's some NFL GMs that believe that this is all part of like Bill Belichick's master plan. He's gonna have a bunch of players opt out, and they're gonna be a terrible team, and then they're gonna like tank for Lawrence or something. I don't know if I would go that far to say that, but there are some other more notable players that have voiced their concerns. So there's a podcast called Double Coverage, and they had Jason McCourty on, and he shared his thoughts about players beginning to report to Gillette Stadium for COVID testing. This was a few days ago, because obviously training camps have opened up. Players are starting to come in. First it was the rookies and the quarterbacks, and now more and more people are starting to come in, and everyone's getting tested. So Jason McCourty, he said, "I'm not gonna lie. For me as a fellow player, I go on social media and it makes me very nervous to think that there will be a season. Because I've gone on social media and seen these guys posting a video in a nightclub. And it's just like, yo, we're attempting to play football. That's not going to be okay. You see guys working out in one city on Monday, working out in another city on Tuesday, and another city the next week. And it's like, dang, if they're working out here, and here, that means you have been traveling and you come across however many people. Or you see a guy posting pictures and there's hundreds of people, whether it's anywhere. So for me, it's nerve-wracking, and not to read the entire thing, but basically his concern is the thing that the NBA doesn't have to worry about, which is the travel. Now, I would say the one thing with baseball is that there are far more road games. In the NFL, it's 8 road games a year. Right? So it's not like there's a whole bunch of travel. But the thing is, what are these players going to do as soon as they leave the game? Right? As soon as that game's over, as soon as those 3 hours are done, what are the players doing? They're going home, yes, but does it necessarily mean that they're not gonna go out to, maybe like Lou Williams, a strip club? And just because they have really good wings, right? Because, I mean, that was the thing with Lou Williams, right? He went home for a family emergency. Apparently it was a funeral, which is very understandable. Go home for the funeral. But he also then stopped at a strip club for food. Now, I've never been to a strip club, just full disclosure. Never been to one. Don't know if I ever would plan to go to one, but I've heard they have good food. At least the high-end ones, they have very good food. So I get that. But a picture was taken of Lou there. It got posted. The NBA found out, and they put him in quarantine, right? You think about Dak Prescott. Supposedly Dak Prescott and Ezekiel Elliott had a big party that had a whole bunch of people over there. There were reports about it. I don't think I ever saw any pictures of it, but it's just the thing of you never quite know what these players are going to do. You don't know if these players are going to travel all over the place and go to these gyms. You don't know if a player is going to be asymptomatic. You don't know these things. A few days ago, the report came out from the NFLPA that a total of 21 NFL players had tested positive since players began reporting to training camp, and that was on Tuesday. I believe the players start reporting to training camp, I believe last week, sometime last week, I believe. It's a big deal. Even though I understand, right? The probability that you're going to die from COVID by the numbers is not very high. But for those who are at risk, players such as, I believe Eddie Goldman he has a respiratory issue. He's opting out. Marcus Cannon, the tackle of the Patriots, he fought cancer, I believe. He's opting out. Now, some other players who did have the same kind of illnesses, they're deciding to play. I think James Conner, who has been cancer-free for 4 years, but fought cancer back in college, he is still planning to play. So it's just a personal decision on if you want to risk it. I believe that obviously the thing I think with James Conner, there is also the thing of he's still on his rookie deal. He was a later round pick. It's not like he's made a bunch of money. So maybe he doesn't want to take the opt out deal. Maybe he actually wants to try and earn all of his money. It could be something like that. But I saw this report, an epidemiologist named Zachary Binney, I believe. The last name is Binney, so Binney, I'm not entirely sure. But he was asked a question about the NFL not creating a bubble like the NBA. And he said, if you're the NFL and you're looking at what happened with the Marlins, you have to expect that something like this is going to happen to you. Unless you are able to change course, re-enter negotiations with the NFLPA, and negotiate something like that, home market bubble. I'm not saying having 32 self-contained market bubbles will be easy. It would be incredibly difficult, but this is a position that our country's response to the virus has put us in. It didn't need to be this way, or this hard, or this dangerous, but it is, and there's nothing you can do about that reality, unfortunately. Which is very, very true, right? America probably had the most poor response to COVID among all the countries, and we're paying for it now. And we're also paying for it with involving our sports. And it is kind of that question of, if one team gets it, does it not throw off the entire schedule? If that team can't play, what are you going to do? Now, the NFL did create a kind of temporary IR thing for players to go on, for players that have tested positive for COVID-19, or for players that may have been exposed to COVID-19, they go on the IR list. And the reason why this is different is because the IR list, that's actually in the NFL, for those who don't know, once you're put on IR, you literally cannot return until, I believe, 8 weeks have passed from your injury. So most of the time when you get put on IR, it is because your season is over. There's always the chance that you come back. Some players came back last year from IR that kind of shocked the world. I believe, was it Quan Alexander with the 49ers? I think he came back. I think JJ Watt God, who was it? I think, yeah. JJ Watt, he came back from the IR list. So, I mean, it's possible to come back from it, but just most of the time you're just not going to. You know, and again, that was a big thing that the NFL tried to figure out, is that these players, if they did happen to come down with COVID, they didn't want to necessarily be gone for the 2-week period of time to make sure that you're clear, but then all of a sudden you need to sit out 6 more weeks because you got put on the IR. So they handled that, I would say, pretty well. They came up with a good idea, a temporary IR until these players no longer test positive for it. But then the thing is, then how many players are going to be exposed to it on the team? Do you quarantine the whole team? What do? Are you just going to pause the league? Probably not. So I think there's just a lot of things the NFL has to worry about. And on top of that, you also have the fact, of course, that the NFL didn't even handle the COVID situation correctly themselves, right? It got to the point where NFL players, big NFL players, had to do a coordinated attack against the NFL with the hashtag "We Want to Play," but we also want you guys to honor what other sports like the NBA are doing. Actually honor the health guidelines. Listen to your own doctors. Like, this is not a joke. And so the NFL went ahead and they made some concessions. I think, they agreed to do daily testing. They agreed to get rid of all the preseason games. So they're just going to go right into playing. I think that we have kind of seen with the NBA's restart. I don't know if you want to go right into games, man. I don't know. I think we've kind of seen with the NBA's restart, some of these scrimmage games, some of these teams look bad. Some of these teams do not look good. So I don't know, maybe like a preseason game would have been nice, at least for these players. I don't know, but we'll wait and we'll see what happens when the season actually does restart. But I think one thing that's very upsetting to see is the amount of people who are upset with players opting out. I understand that for a lot of these fans, they really want to see their players, they want to see their favorite players out there playing. They want to see their team at full strength. And I think I even saw somebody say some garbage like, oh, what if doctors started opting out of working on people? Okay, well, a doctor's job is to care for people, right? If they didn't want to care for people, then they shouldn't be a doctor. These NFL players, they are not trained doctors. Not everyone is Laurent Duvernay-Tardif, right? Not everyone is that man who has a doctorate in medicine. A lot of these players, they're athletes. Of course, they have interests on the outside. They have other passions. I'm not saying that they're just meatheads. But they play a game, not only for themselves, but they play for the entertainment of millions of people around, not only America, but around the world. And because they don't want to risk their health, because they don't want to risk their family getting sick, you're going to criticize these players? That is ridiculous. Dante Hightower opted out because he's a new father. He has had a kid. He doesn't want to risk bringing COVID around a newborn. That's very understandable. I think that's a concern with Russell Wilson, right? Yeah, he and Sarah just had another kid. Little Win Wilson. And there's a chance that maybe he doesn't want to risk bringing COVID. Now, do I think Russell Wilson would opt out of the season? No, I do not. Because I also believe if a star quarterback opts out of this season, I think that might start an absolute avalanche for the NFL season, and it might be over before it even began. If one humongous star opts out of this season, especially a quarterback, I think that would give some other quarterbacks, that might give some other players here the guts to opt out themselves. It'll give them the confidence that they won't be the only person doing it, that somebody else did it, and so they feel like they can then speak up. It could be a serious trickle-down effect. That's what it seems like has happened with all the players opting out, right? It was one player opted out, then all of a sudden there were 4 more, and then there's 5 more, and it's just going from there. This was the big concern when COVID really started to hit, and when the NBA's season got postponed, when the MLB's, when all these sports went on hold, all of a sudden the concern became, what's going to happen with sports when like the NFL comes back around? Is COVID going to be gone? And so many people thought COVID would be taken care of by then. So many people thought, oh, everything will be fine. Everything will be okay. We're going to continue like normal. And that's just not what's happening. Now there is apparently a last thing I read, there was a vaccine that I believe the UK purchased and America purchased. And it's something, I believe it's kind of in the testing area. So it's not even like guaranteed to work, but it is something. It's the most success that apparently anyone has been able to find so far, when it comes to a possible vaccine, because it boosts the immune system of people. So that's a step in the right direction, but this thing might still not be ready until, maybe November, December, until next year. This thing could still not be ready. It could still not be ready for another year or more. Because you just never quite know how this is going to work, right? Germs are just everywhere. Germs are always evolving. And this NFL season, I'm not going to say it's in jeopardy. I'm not going to say that. But some of these teams' seasons are going to completely go up in smoke. The Patriots, so far, with the amount of players they have had opting out, their season is possibly going up in smoke. And I actually think that this might be a blessing in disguise to Bill Belichick, because the more starters he loses, if all of a sudden he's gonna go out there with like, out of 22 starters, if he all of a sudden goes out there with like 8 starters from last year, are people really gonna hold it against Bill Belichick if his team sucks? I don't think so. I wouldn't. What on earth do you expect him to do? New quarterbacks, new tackles, new safeties, because all of his other players are out, new linebackers, because all of his other big-time players are opting out of the season? Hell no. You know, I think this season could be a real blessing in disguise. And so, like, when training camp was starting up, I was looking out for a few different things. I was looking for one, you know, how do players look? Is it going well? Do these players look rusty? You know, how is everything looking? It was that. I wanted to see what kind of injuries were coming about. You know, were they major breaks? Were they small tissue injuries? Is it cramping? You know, what kind of condition are these players in? And then the other thing I was looking forward to seeing, or I guess not looking forward, that's the wrong term. The other thing I was curious about was how does the COVID testing work? And what kind of players, you know, how are people testing? Are they testing positive, negative? And I said, at least as reported on Tuesday, 22 players had tested positive since training camp had started. So, it's not bad so far. I think that there are a lot of players who are going to take this seriously, and they are not going to go out to the club, and they're not going to go out to the mall, and they're not going to go out to the park. You know, they're not going to do these things and possibly risk getting sick, because you could get your teammates sick. And obviously, there's the situation with the Jazz where Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell don't even like to talk to or at least Donovan Mitchell doesn't even really want to talk to Rudy Gobert anymore. At least the last thing I read about it was that their relationship was kind of over. Even though I think that was kind of overblown. You just never know, right? If your teammate goes out there and is being irresponsible, gives you COVID, all of a sudden your family has COVID, how is that going to affect the locker room? I think there's a lot of things to worry about. What happened to the Marlins is the fear of the NFL in what happens if a team comes down with COVID. You know? It's a concern. It is a concern to worry about. I'm still optimistic. I'm hoping for an NFL season, but I cannot lie. That after seeing what happened with the Marlins, they don't have a bubble. The NFL doesn't have a bubble. The NBA does have a bubble. And so far, the NBA has not had any coronavirus outbreak. Anyways, coming up next, some of these Chiefs players have been coming out, and they've been talking about how many Super Bowls they're going to win. I have some thoughts about that. Up next.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment, we talked about the COVID outbreak of the Marlins and how that has kind of affected the NFL. Some of the NFL players that have been opting out of the season. It's a big deal. I do not believe we can hold it against any of these players if they decide to opt out. For some of them, COVID is a bigger issue, right? I understand there's the whole anti-mask crowd. I understand there's the group of people out there that think COVID is a hoax, which I think is ridiculous. But, you know, it is what it is. If these players want to opt out because they don't want to risk bringing it to their family or getting infected themselves, whatever it might be, it is totally within their right, and I fully respect that. Anyways, so the Chiefs obviously this past season won the Super Bowl. And there's always the thing about if you win the Super Bowl, or if you lose the Super Bowl, either way, is the thought of a hangover. Right? The Falcons, they went to the Super Bowl, and they lost that Super Bowl in one of the most demoralizing fashions I have ever seen in my life, and since then they haven't been right. the Seahawks, after their loss to the Patriots, while they have continued to win and they've continued to go to the playoffs, they haven't had a meaningful playoff win since 2015, maybe? And I I'd probably say since 2014, because what did they do? In they beat the Vikings because Blair Walsh missed the kick, and they beat the Lions, and they beat the Eagles. Other than that, what have they done, right? The Seahawks, they haven't necessarily been right. There's just been this history that teams, when they go to the Super Bowl, you expend so much energy throughout the season, and then whether you win or you lose, either you're partying too hard, or you get too big of a head, maybe you start resting on your laurels, and then just the coming season, you have a target on your back, every team is wanting to give you their best, and maybe you're too caught up in, hey, we won the title last year, right? I mean, we're better than these guys, and then all of a sudden you have a bad season, or you just don't make it as far as you probably should. But the reason why people were so high on the Chiefs coming into the season was because they were going to return like 90% of their starters, right? What was it? I think at the time it was 21 of 22 starters they were going to return. And at this point now, I believe it's 20 of 22 with Duvernay having opted out. So they're still in a very, very good spot. They're in a better spot than some of these other teams, that's for sure. But one thing that you always want to avoid is putting extra expectations on your team. I.e., let's just say the Browns. The Browns coming into last season, they were making so much noise. They got Odell Beckham. They got all these star players. Oh, they're going to be so much better this year. And then the year was a complete disaster. And even though they weren't the worst team in the league, they sure as hell weren't the best. And they totally underachieved as compared to the talent on their team. So sometimes it's just, you gotta just avoid putting the extra expectations on you. People, they can already see the kind of talent you've got. They can already see do not open your mouth when you don't need to. Now, for me personally, I am somebody who likes to hear players talk. I like to hear that stuff. I'm not one of these people. While I think that guys like Russell Wilson are great, I think guys like Andrew Luck are great, I don't think the league needs to be full of Russell Wilsons. I like a Jalen Ramsey. I like a Stephon Diggs. I like listening to these guys who like to talk, open their mouth, and trash people. That's fun to me. But to an extent, sometimes you do need to be careful what you say. So, a couple weeks ago, or about a week ago really, Chris Jones went on KCSP 610 Sports Radio, and Jones made a very interesting prediction when it came to their aspirations when it comes to future Super Bowls. Jones said, "This is only the beginning. We plan to have another parade, and another parade, and another parade. We're going to make sure we bring not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5+ rings to Kansas City. It's been 50 years of waiting, but the wait is over now. It's time to create a dynasty." Now, everyone has a different opinion on what a dynasty is. Some people say that you need to win a certain amount of titles in a row in order to be a dynasty. Some people believe you just need to win a certain amount of title in a set amount of years to be a dynasty. I don't really know what I would say. You know, I think that the Patriots have been a dynasty throughout the last 20 years with the amount that they win, 9 Super Bowls, 6 Super Bowl titles. I think that the Patriots have been a dynasty over the last 20 years. So, and I don't know, I think they're kind of like the only dynasty as of recent, if we're going to be really completely honest, at least in the NFL. It's hard to be a dynasty because it's hard to win that much. It's hard to win that much and to not let your ego get the best of you. It's hard to not rest on your laurels. It's hard to work that hard all the time, the grind of the season. You're playing so many more extra games than these other people. It can be really, really grinding on you. But he had that to say. And then Chiefs wide receiver Tyreek Hill, he went on First Take, and he said something insane. So they asked him about, Chris Jones coming out saying what he said. This is what Tyreek Hill had to say. He said, "Well, I'm not going to say he's telling a fib. But Chris Jones, he's definitely a man of his word, and we're definitely creating something special here in KC. So I don't see why say 5? Why not go 7 rings? Right now, we're just chasing Michael Jordan. So that's what we do. So I'm going over 5, and I'm saying 7. And he's saying that because Jordan won 6 NBA championships. He's 6-0. He's recognized as the greatest of all time. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but nonetheless, he's known as the greatest of all time. I do not like the fact that they're speaking out like this. For me personally, I'm just not a fan of it. This team already has the expectations. Patrick Mahomes is under a new deal that's the richest contract in sports history, and I understand there's a lot of people who still don't like the deal. There's a lot of people who still believe that Mahomes kind of got fleeced, that his agent did him a disservice. Look, Mahomes came out, he spoke about his contract, he said specifically that he wanted to take the deal that he did because he wants his team to be able to re-sign guys. He understands how the salary cap works, or at least he understands that the more money he takes, the less of a chance they're going to be able to re-sign Travis Kelce in the future, the less of a chance that they'd have to re-sign Chris Jones, and so on and so forth. Alright, they already have that over their head. They have the fact that they are returning the majority of their starters, which just usually doesn't happen. People already know that when it comes to the AFC, the Patriots are now basically gone. Really, their only threat, if anything, is the Ravens, and the Ravens can't even seem to win a playoff game with Lamar Jackson. When it comes to all the teams in the NFC, they all kind of beat up on each other. There's a lot of good teams in the NFC, but it's a lot, who are they going to beat? They came from behind, 28-0 against the Texans and scored 40 straight. I mean, they showed they came back game after game after game. Patrick Mahomes came back against the Niners. People have seen how explosive this team is and just how well they play when everything is clicking. They already have the expectations on their shoulders. But now you got Tyreek Hill and you got Chris Jones coming out here talking about how they're going to win 5 or 6 or 7 rings. Seriously? I would not be surprised if after these comments they didn't win another one. I just wouldn't be surprised, because sometimes that's just kind of how life works, right? Sometimes you just open your mouth a bit too much and it comes back to bite you. Now, I would not put money on that. I would put money on they're at least going to win 2 more titles in the Mahomes era. I would absolutely put money down on that. Because I think Mahomes is the best quarterback in the NFL. I think he and Andy Reid are crazy. He has shown that he can make anything work. You lose Tyreek Hill, the next week DeMarcus Robinson is gonna be your number 1 receiver basically, and he's gonna have 100 yards and 3 touchdown grabs. I mean, that is just insane. And I know there's some people out there who love it when their team talks like this. They love to see the confidence, and don't get me wrong, I like to see the confidence too. It kind of goes to show that this team, at least they know how good that they are. They know how good they were this last year. They know what they did in the playoffs. They know that they came back and just whomped and embarrassed the Texans. They know that they whomped the Titans. They know that they embarrassed the 49ers in the Super Bowl with the way that they came back and won it. And they know that since Mahomes has basically become their full-time starter, they don't lose. They just don't lose, and they are in every single game, and the defense was top 10, and the offense was a top offense, and Andy Reid is still there, all the guys are still there. What is the concern? But for me personally, I would just prefer it if they don't speak. Do you guys remember when the Eagles won the Super Bowl? And what was it? They had the underdog mask with Nick Foles at the helm, and they had an incredible regular season, and then Nick Foles just caught fire in the playoffs and was performing at one of the most elite levels that has ever been seen by a quarterback in the playoffs. And they go and they win the game. And you remember what Lane Johnson said that coming off season. I believe he said something along the lines of, he criticized the way that the Patriots run their organizations. He said that it doesn't look fun. It doesn't look like they're having fun over there. It looks like everyone there is just kind of a robot. I want to play in a place that has fun. We have fun here with the Eagles. You know what the Eagles have done since then? And I'm not going to say it's simply because of this quote. I don't even know if I would say it has anything to do with this quote. But do you just know what they've done since then? They've been 9-7 and 9-7 since then. And they've won one playoff game since then. They've won the division one time since then. So I mean, they've been okay, but they haven't been 13-3 again. Their quarterback hasn't been an MVP level team. They haven't been one of the top teams in the league because this league is so hard to consistently win in. So many things in football are about luck. Injuries sometimes are just luck based. A fumble bouncing in the direct way, in your team's favor instead of the other team's favor, is a luck thing. That ball getting tipped and getting picked off or not picked off, it can be a luck thing. When it comes to the one-score victory, like Seattle last season, I think there's a stat, they only had one game that wasn't decided by a score. That can be flipped. Or I think 11 games were decided by one score, something like that. That is such a freaky stat. That is such an anomaly. I don't know if that will ever happen again. That is something that can completely flip the next season. The NFL, it is fluid. It is a very fluid league. And to win consistently in this league, the attrition with how physical it is, the kind of blows that your body takes. This isn't baseball. And the baseball season itself is a grind because of the amount of games that you play. But the NFL is the most physical of all these sports. It takes an incredible amount of skill to play it, don't get me wrong. But then on top of that, there's so much luck that goes into it. There's always stuff with the referees. Just look at the Saints, right? Look at the Saints over the last few years. You have the Minneapolis Miracle, which was insane. You have that absolute blunder of a missed call against the Rams, the most blatant, obvious pass interference that didn't get called. And then this last season, there's the push-off in the end zone that had just recently been called against another defensive back or against another receiver. The receiver kind of pushed off and it got called for, but then Kyle Rudolph does it to the defensive back and it doesn't get called because, at that point of the game, you're just letting the players play. You just never know. Right? And these are questions that are going to be brought up throughout the season, and they're going to be asked to everybody. It will not just be Tyreek Hill. It won't just be Chris Jones being asked about this. It's going to be Patrick Mahomes. It's going to be the head coach. It's going to be, Travis Kelce or their offensive line or Frank Clark. It's going to be other players who are asked about these proclamations that their other star players made. Right? These are checks that they have to cash. It's not just Jones and the guy. It's everybody that has to catch. Right? That is a thing that they talked about with the Ball family. I know that's probably a name that many of you haven't heard in a very long time, but the Ball family, LeVar, Lonzo, and the crew, a big thing with LeVar that was constantly said is that his boys need to cash these checks that LeVar keeps writing them. LeVar was saying, no, I'm going to write them myself. I'm going to cash them myself. Well, you weren't out there playing. It's Lonzo and the guys who have to be out there playing. So, no, it's them who have to cash the checks that your big mouth. And I love LeVar. I really do. But I'd be lying if I said he wasn't writing checks that his boys needed to cash. And so far, they haven't, right? Lonzo's on a new team. LiAngelo isn't even in the league. He's on a G League team, and the G League was canceled this season. And LaMelo is supposed to be looking to get drafted, and then there's a question about how all that is going to look, and it's just a mess because this NBA season isn't even over yet, and it's just been postponed. It's really interesting. It's a very, very interesting situation there. But the point is, just don't talk. Just don't talk. Or I guess if you're gonna talk, you better be ready to back it up. I'm gonna assume that these guys are ready to back it up. And you know what? If they go out there and they win it this year, or at least they get back to the Super Bowl and then you know, they're like a bounce or a pass away from winning it, then okay, you know what? Maybe go ahead and talk. You guys clearly seem to know what it is that you're doing. But just for my personal standpoint, just not a fan of it. I prefer if everyone just stayed quiet. Let Mahomes do his thing. Let Andy Reid do his thing. You guys do your thing. You know, if Chris Jones wants to talk about himself and say, oh, I'm going to have the biggest sack season in NFL history, that's great. If Tyreek Hill wants to go out there and say he wants to break the receiving record for yards in the season, hey, have at it, man. But don't be writing things for your whole team to cash when you got to depend on all the other dudes out there, and you never exactly know how it's going to pan out. Anyways, coming up next, the NFL Top 100 list has been getting released, and I have some real problems with the rankings of some of these players. It is ridiculous. I'm going to talk about this list a little bit and give my thoughts on it. That up next.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment, talked a little bit about the Chiefs, some of the players that have been coming out and basically making these proclamations that they're going to go on to win not 1, not 4, but 7 championships, 7 Super Bowls, which would be an insane accomplishment. And don't get me wrong, I think the Chiefs team is great. I just think that they need to not talk about it, especially if it's not coming from Mahomes' mouth. This is coming from the pieces around him. I just don't like it. I don't like that they're coming out and talking about it. But again, I do like hearing players talk. I do. And that's all fine and dandy. But just when it comes to the whole making proclamations for Super Bowls, just go back to the LeBron speech, right? Obviously, that was a playoff of LeBron's speech when he went to Miami. He was saying we're not going to win, not 1, not 2, not 3. They won 2 titles in Miami, and that is seen as an actual failure. Because of how many titles that he had said they were going to win. Whether he may have been joking or not, the thing that people hang on to is that quote. So just don't talk about it. Anyways, so at the, once the NFL season concludes every single year, you have certain lists that come out. And you have obviously which players make the Pro Bowl. That happens, towards the end of the season. They announce who's made the Pro Bowl. At the end of the season, they talk about who has made the All-Pro team, first team All-Pro, second team All-Pro, different things like that. They, of course, hand out the awards, whether it be the MVP, Offensive Player of the Year, and all these awards are fine and dandy. But the big thing that what a lot of players care about is the respect of their peers. The fans' respect is one thing, the respect of the coaches is another thing, or NFL front offices is one thing. But it's the respect of the players around you, the guys on your team, the guys on your on other teams, whether it be in your division or in your conference or in the other conference, who you play on a consistent basis. You want the respect of those players. So the NFL started doing the top 100 list, which is voted on supposedly by the players. But every single year, there's some rankings that just don't quite make sense, right? In one year, Matt Ryan won the MVP. Usually the MVP was also number one on the list, because the way that these lists are voted on is not only by the players, but it's supposed to be based off of the previous season. So basically, because of how you performed in that season, it should be how the players grade you. It should be how they vote on you. But that's never exactly how it is, right? Because Matt Ryan won the MVP one year, and he was voted as the 10th best player in the league. And I believe that every single other year until that point, the MVP was number one. So it went to show you what the players thought about Matt Ryan. They weren't quite sure he was the best player in the NFL. He was one of the 10 best, clearly. But was he the best? They weren't quite sure about that. Tim Tebow one time made the NFL Top 100 list. He was like 95. Tim Tebow has never been a Top 100 player in his career. Never. Never. But he was put in there because he had gained some of the respect of his peers. He had that one magical run with the Broncos when he got them into the playoffs. Won a playoff game. But was he ever really one of the best 100 players in the league? No. If you look, for 2 straight top 100 lists, J.J. Watt made it. And he played like 4 games in those 2 seasons. But he made it on because of the respect he had around the league. It wasn't based off of what he did those seasons. It was simply based off his reputation and the fact that the players were like, no, he has to be one of the best 100 players. There's no way he's not. So this NFL Top 100 list has been coming out periodically over the last couple of days, and I had a problem with it the first day that the list came out. So a couple of podcasts ago, I did my top 10 underrated players in the league. I want to go ahead and just throw away that entire list. There are certain players I realized I didn't even think about, but then at the same time, seeing where some of these players got ranked on this list made me realize my list was garbage. So I'm going to completely disqualify that entire list. Levante David came in at number 100. That is an absolute shame that Levante David was relegated to the 100th best player in the league. Kyler Murray was 90. Okay. I mean, Kyler Murray's not a better football player than Levante David, but okay. Josh Allen was 87. And I'm not talking about the Josh Allen in Jacksonville. I'm talking about the Josh Allen who's the quarterback for the Buffalo Bills. He came in 87. Are you trying to tell me that Josh Allen is 13 spots better than Levante David? Absolutely not. Kyler Murray being behind Josh Allen? Absolutely not. I believe if the Bills had Kyler Murray over Josh Allen, I would actually think that they are a possible Super Bowl contending team. Because Josh Allen is surrounded with better pieces, a better defense, everything. I think Kyler Murray would absolutely fly in that offense. Given Stephon Diggs over there, and Beasley, and John Brown, and a pretty solid offensive line, there is no way Kyler Murray wouldn't be able to do what Josh Allen has done with it, and more. Josh Allen barely threw for 3,000 yards last season. He had 20 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. His career completion percentage is like 59%. That is terrible. I mean, that is actually terrible. 59% complete. People give Cam Newton so much garbage for his completion percentage. Josh Allen is pathetic when it comes to his completion percentage. Now, don't get me. Now, I talked about this. One of my first podcasts I talked about Josh Allen, and I talked about his grades and the fact that he actually graded worse his second year than he did his rookie year. Barely worse, but he graded worse. But yet the team did better. Right? The Patriots weren't exactly the same. The Dolphins fell apart. The Jets fell apart. The Bills, I think, kind of had a bit of an easier schedule. Their defense was still elite. Josh Allen cut down on the turnovers. And so the team was better. But what did I call the Bills? I said that the Bills are Saxonville. They are the 2018 Bears. They are a team that is being completely held back by their quarterback, but they have so much talent around them. If they would just get the quarterback right, then they should be fine. They would actually be able to capitalize on the team that they have now. But they had Josh Allen at number 87. Okay. Keenan Allen was ranked 77th. The year before, he was 38. Now he's at 77. And Keenan Allen did not like this. He tweeted out and he said, starting to think I did something to somebody. And he then tweeted out and said, okay, I'm tired of biting my tongue. And I'll go and say who he meant. Tyreek Hill, Mike Evans, and Chris Godwin, and the list goes on, are not a better receiver than me. Faster than me every day of the week, but separation, child, please. I am the best wide receiver in the AFC West without question. And I mean, I would probably agree that I don't think you can find 76 players better than Keenan Allen. I do not believe that. I think Keenan Allen is great. The problem is really, if anything, his health. But, you know, he's a great receiver. He is one of the best when it comes to route running. I'd say when it comes to the best route runners in the NFL, I mean, you have guys like Keenan Allen, Devontae Adams, probably say Cooper Kupp. There are some, Amari Cooper. There are some outstanding route runners in this league. Keenan Allen is most certainly, when he's healthy, one of the best. But, he came in at 77, which I thought was a terrible ranking. Devontae Adams, I think, was a 57. And again, he fell in his rankings from the year before. And I think maybe it had to do with the fact that he battled some injuries because his numbers weren't exactly as good as they were last year. I'm not too sure. But, even he after his ranking came out, he tweeted out and said, lol, whatever, thanks, I guess. Honestly, I officially don't believe the players made the list this year. Lol, I almost threw up last night when I saw where Keenan was, then I'm 57 today. Look, Larry Fitzgerald made the list again. Larry Fitzgerald has been a solid receiver throughout his career. He's been one of the best. I mean, he is one of the GOAT receivers. He's not Jerry Rice good, but there's people there who believe he is either the second, the third, maybe the fourth best receiver of all time. His longevity, the level he's done to that is great. But Larry Fitzgerald isn't better than Keenan Allen. Especially at this point in his career. I don't think Larry Fitzgerald is the 69th best NFL player in the league. I don't believe that he is. How many spots is that? Is that 30? I don't believe he's 31 spots better than Levante David. That is a complete resume vote because he's such a well-respected member in the league, and I just believe that until he actually retires, he will not. That he'll probably be on this list until he retires. I believe even after this next season, he will probably still be on it. Of course, unless he retires, because then in that case, they won't put him on the list. But I believe he'd still get votes. Look, he's one of the best receivers of all times, has some of the most sure hands, if not the most sure hands in NFL history, didn't have a single drop last year. He is a great, solid, productive receiver, but he is not better at this point than Keenan Allen. Another ranking that I had a real big problem with was Todd Gurley's ranking. Todd Gurley was ranked number 51 in the NFL. Todd Gurley didn't even crack 1,000 yards rushing this past season. He had 857. He averaged 3.8 yards a carry. Now, he had 12 touchdowns, yes. But compare these last two seasons. So, in 2018, he had 256 carries for 1,251 yards, 4.9 a carry, 17 rushing touchdowns. The next season, he had 223 carries for 857 yards, 3.8 a carry, 12 touchdowns. That is not good. He was one of the worst, least productive running backs in the league this past year. Now, of course, you can go ahead and blame the Rams' offensive line. It was significantly worse this past season, which heavily affected Jared Goff. There wasn't enough time for him to throw the ball. There weren't the rushing lanes for Todd Gurley to go through. But he was terrible. And I think the main reason why it is that he even got the ranking that he got is because he was number 4. He was ranked number 4 on the top 100 list in 2018. And it's kind of like what happened to Cam Newton, right? In 2015, after that season, he was ranked number 1 on the list. And then the next season, that was a debacle for the Panthers. I believe Cam Newton was voted into like the 40s, like 41, 42, something like that. It was ridiculous. His play totally did not deserve it. But he still got the ranking because the season prior he had won the MVP, and how are you going to leave the former MVP off the list just 1 year later? Right? It wouldn't make any sense. But I think it's kind of what happened to Todd Gurley. Todd Gurley had this outstanding season the year prior, and then this last season, I'm sure there's a lot of players where they don't really blame it on they don't blame it on him. They blame the Rams. They blame the offensive line. But for him to be number 51 is insane. He is not 49 spots better than Levante David. I don't even know if I'd say he was better than Josh Allen this past season. But that's just my opinion, right? So I thought that was kind of ridiculous that he got that ranking. Another guy that I'm pretty sure you all know. Remember Tom Brady? Remember that guy? The guy who left the Patriots finally and is in Tampa Bay now. Remember him? The guy who replaced Jameis Winston in his 30-pick self. Tom Brady was ranked 14th on this list. Tom Brady was not the 14th best player in the NFL this past season. He just wasn't. He wasn't even a top 10 quarterback. I think Pro Football Focus, had him ranked 21st in the league, I think. If I'm remembering off the top of my head correctly. He was not that player. He was not. He was significantly worse in many other categories. Now, he's in a good position with Tampa Bay when it comes to their offensive personnel to change people's opinion about him. But going off of this past season, he was not the same. And I think that this is his lowest ranking of his career. He has never been outside of the top 10 before, so at least the players had the wherewithal to at least drop him out of the top 10. But they also put him over Aaron Rodgers. Now, you can kind of go back and forth on this. They weren't too different when it came to their QBRs this last season, which QBR, for those of you who don't know, takes in what a quarterback does not only with their arm, but also with their feet. It encompasses everything that they do. I think Rodgers was ranked a little bit higher than him, but it wasn't too different. And they had Rodgers, I think, a spot or 2 behind Tom Brady, which, that's fine. You know, I'm not gonna make too big of a fuss over that, but I do think it is interesting to see how the decline of these two quarterbacks has kind of been documented. Many people think that this last season was a down year for both of them, and now they're both outside of the top 10, which is, again, something I don't think Tom Brady has ever been. I do not believe he's ever been out of the top 10, and for Rodgers, I think I've seen him ranked 11th before, but he's another guy who has perennially been in the top 10 as well. So it's interesting, you know. It's really interesting seeing what the players think of them. The players are still think of these guys highly enough to put them in the upper 20 of the league, and some of it is based off of their name. Sometimes you just, you sit there and you think to yourself, Aaron Rodgers? Well, of course, Aaron Rodgers is a good quarterback. It's Aaron freaking Rodgers, and it's the same thing for Tom Brady. But at some point in time, you got to take off the rose-colored glasses, right? At some point in time, you got to look and you got to try and see the red flags, and there are red flags on both of these guys. They have both gotten older. Both of them have slowed down. Both of them are not the same players. I'm glad that the NFL players did put them outside of the top 10, but I guess it goes to show how much respect and your resume kind of get you in this league. Now, the NFL, they have announced who the final top 10 players are. I have not watched them yet. I am going to watch them at a later time, and I'm going to react to it and do a top 10 list on how I would rank these guys in my next podcast. I'm going to save the reaction for that time. But the final 10 players in the NFL Top 100 list are Aaron Donald, Derrick Henry, Patrick Mahomes, Russell Wilson, Lamar Jackson, Michael Thomas, Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle, DeAndre Hopkins, and Stephon Gilmore. I do not know their rankings yet. I don't know what kind of an order they got placed in. All I know is that they were all put in the top 10. And I guess you can kind of say Aaron Donald, he is the best defensive lineman in the NFL. He is arguably, you could say, the best non-quarterback football player in the league. Derrick Henry was the best running back last year. He carried the Titans. If I was going to have a problem with anybody being in the top 10, I would say it would be Derrick Henry, just because even though he carried the Titans throughout the regular season, he was not the most dominant running back. I think guys like Nick Chubb did every bit as much as Derrick Henry did, and he actually graded a lot better than Derrick Henry as well. But Nick Chubb, he's not, I think he was in the 30s or something, right? He wasn't even in the top, not even in the top 20. Obviously Patrick Mahomes, best quarterback in the league. Russell Wilson, first or second best quarterback in the league. Lamar Jackson was the MVP last year. That's understandable. Michael Thomas broke the catch record and has been the most consistent receiver since entering the league. He has been an absolute monster, catches everything in his path. He's unguardable, even though he's a slower receiver. Christian McCaffrey is probably the best all-around running back in the league, catching and running. George Kittle, either the first or second best tight end in the league. DeAndre Hopkins, in many people's mind, the best receiver in the league. I would not put him as the best receiver in the league. Spoiler for my list, but I do think he's great. And Stephon Gilmore, arguably the best cornerback in the league. So, one of the most entertaining things about sports usually comes with lists. Because it's just always interesting. The top 10 basketball players of all time. The top 10 football players of all time. The top 10 quarterbacks of all time. All the different lists that you can possibly make, right? They just did the NFL top 100 team or whatever. The 100 years of the NFL, and they did their all-time team. And you got to see who it is that they value, right? I don't think Shannon Sharp made the NFL's 100-year anniversary team, which I thought was kind of ridiculous. There's some other players that didn't make it. It didn't make any sense to me. I don't think Drew Brees made it, and I thought that was insane. He's the NFL's all-time leading passer and everything. But at the end of the day, the lists are the lists. They create debate, they create discussion, and it's always interesting. But when it comes to the NFL Top 100 Players list, the thing about it isn't just one player's opinion. It is every player that decides to vote. I don't know if every player does vote, but it's every player that decides to vote's opinion, and then they just put it all together and you see what comes out. And for whatever reason, guys like Josh Allen, Todd Gurley still made the list. Some other guys who just are glaring omissions from the list. I don't know why Ryan Ramczyk is in the 80s. I don't know why Allen is in the 80s when he should be probably in the 200s somewhere. I don't know why Levante David is 100 when he deserves to be like in the 50s or 40s. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. And it's just, don't put too much stock in the list, but it is interesting to see how NFL players feel about each other. Anyways, Keenan Allen had a problem with his ranking and called out some receivers publicly, saying that they are not better than him. Well, up next, we're going to do my top 10 wide receivers in the NFL right now. That next. Stay tuned.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment, we talked about the NFL Top 100 players list. I gave my opinion on some of the rankings of some players that I had a problem with, some things I liked about it. In my next podcast, we're going to cover the top 10 of the list. And my top 10 list that week will be based off of the NFL Top 100's top 10, and I'm going to basically rank it the way that I personally would. I have no idea at the moment because I haven't watched it yet. I have no idea how it is that they ranked them, so it's going to be new to me, and I will have a reaction for you guys in my next podcast. But nonetheless, Keenan Allen, again, had a real problem with his ranking. Called out Mike Evans, called out Chris Godwin, called out Tyreek Hill, and basically said, these guys are not better than me. They are not better receivers than me. People need to put some respect on my name. And Devontae Adams kind of shared his sentiment. Devontae Adams didn't like his ranking either. Said that he about threw up when he saw he and Keenan Allen's rankings. And there's a lot of players out there where they just never quite appreciate where they are. And for some of it is good reason, right? I think Keenan Allen is very, very underrated, and I think part of it has to do with his injuries. So him complaining about his ranking, which I think is very valid, basically made me think about which receivers in the NFL do I think are the 10 best? I haven't really sat down and done it before. So I started to go through all the receivers in the league, went to Pro Football Focus, went to just the regular old stats and everything. And after a few days of working on this list, and I think it's good, I think this is a solid list I came up with, I have gotten to my final 10. Now, we're going to start at number 10, work our way down to 1. Obviously, 1 is going to be the receiver that I like the most, and 10 being the one I like the least of the 10. But I think that this is a solid list. And here's the thing, right? Once you usually get past like the top 5, you can kind of put guys anywhere. There's not much that really starts to separate all of them. It just depends on who you like. So some of these guys, at least my 10 through 6 ranking, you can probably mix and match them a little bit. But nonetheless, this is what I have come out to. So at number 10, I have Jarvis Landry. Jarvis Landry has been a volume receiver his entire career. He has 80 catches or more every single year of his career. Now, he's never going to have big yardage, right? He might get 1,000, might get a little bit over 1,000, but he's never going to be probably a 1,500, 1,600 yard receiver. I think his career high in touchdown catches is 9, so he's not really a big touchdown guy either, but he is a solid slot receiver. He does his job well, very consistent. In 6 years, he has 564 catches. You have to keep in mind, he led 2017 with 112. He almost averages 100 catches a year. He stays healthy. While he might not start every single game, he has played 16 games every single year of his career. He's a 5-time Pro Bowler. This guy was a late second-round pick. And he is a leader in the locker room. He went to Cleveland and changed their mentality, and is a big reason why that team is where it is now, at least with the fact that it is winning games and it's no longer just winning 1 or 2 or 0 games. I think Jarvis Landry is great. I think he's very underrated. I think he could have probably easily made my, I feel like he could have made my underrated players list, but again, this is a player I didn't think about. So again, I'm going to throw away my whole list. But I have Jarvis Landry at number 10. And number 9, I have Allen Robinson. Again, his 2015 season, he showed everybody that he can be one of the best receivers in the league. Was tied for the lead in touchdown catches, had about 1,500 yards, close to 100 catches, and that was with Blake Bortles. He's one of the best in the league when it comes to contested catches. His highest grades of his career were 84, a 77, and an 80, in which he was, healthy, playing all the games. And that was with Blake Bortles and Mitch Trubisky as his quarterback. I mean, my goodness. Can someone please get this guy? Someone who can throw him an accurate pass. I mean, it's ridiculous what he has had to work with. He has been so misused in his career, and he's just probably going to be another one of those receivers who might never get that top flight quarterback. Unless, I guess, Nick Foles comes in. Maybe Nick Foles can throw him a bit more of an accurate pass. Maybe Nick Foles can use him a bit better than Mitch has or Bortles has. But I think Allen Robinson's talent is all there. He's a big-bodied receiver. He's a freakish athlete. I think the thing is he just doesn't necessarily get the chances that some of these other guys do to really showcase his skill. But I have Allen Robinson at number 9. At number 8, I have Mike Evans. Now, Mike Evans is, I think, the tallest receiver in the league right now. He's not the fastest, but if you sleep on him, he can blow by you. In 6 years, he has only missed 6 games. So he stays healthy, very consistent. He has had 1,000 yards in every single year of his career. He kind of lacks in the touchdown area of things, which is kind of a concern because you would think he'd be a big red zone target, but I think part of that probably just has to do with Jameis Winston being a turnover machine. Probably some of those passes that were meant for Evans just got picked off, so that could be it. But his pro football grades throughout his career, 84, 83, 91, 79, 84, 85. He was the 6th best wide receiver this last year. A very consistent player. I think Mike Evans is underappreciated. There's some games that he does kind of disappear in. I think kind of depends on the corner. Maybe sometimes a corner, if they're a bit more physical with him, they seem to be able to shut him down a bit. But there's no denying the guy's talent, right? So I got Mike Evans at number 8. At number 7, I got Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen was a 3rd round pick. So he has just always had that natural chip on his shoulder. And since he was a rookie, he was the 7th best wide receiver in the league, is what he was graded out to be. So as a rookie, the guy was solid. Now the biggest thing with him is that he has health issues, right? Last season was the first year. This is amazing, actually. Last year was the first year he started and played all 16 games. That is incredible. And if you just look at these last 3 years, his catches went 102, 97, 104. 6 touchdowns every single one of those years. He didn't have less than basically 1,200 yards. And he is arguably the best route runner in the league. He has acknowledged he is not the fastest, but when it comes to setting you up in his routes, his footwork, he is one of the best. It's between him, Devontae Adams, guys like Cooper Kupp, that section of people, their route running is just impeccable. Keenan Allen's problem really is just his health. He's just not healthy enough, but when he's on the field and he's right, the dude is an absolute stud. And I think this offseason, he is slated to be, this next coming offseason, he's slated to be a free agent. I think the Chargers would be smart to re-sign him. But at the same time, if someone wanted to say they were apprehensive to re-sign him because of his health issues, I can't say I don't understand that. I get it. He has missed a lot of games in his career. But his talent is there. So maybe, I don't know, guarantee him a lot of money. Maybe don't pay him super high annually, but guarantee him a lot of money. I don't know, something like that. At number 6... I have Devontae Adams. Now, Devontae Adams was a bit of a late bloomer. The first few years of his career, he was kind of a hit or miss receiver. Was maybe nice at best, but these last few years, he has been great. He seems to miss about a game or 2 every single year, but you can live with that. If your best receiver is healthy for 14, 13 games a year, I mean, you can live with that, but you would obviously like them to be there all 16, but injuries happen. Sometimes when you're a bigger body receiver, you just take hits a bit differently because guys have to tackle you a bit differently. So injuries can happen. But the last 3 out of the 4 years, he had 10 touchdowns every single year. The last 3 of the 4 years, 10 touchdowns every single year. He is easily Aaron Rodgers' number 1 guy. He's one of the best route runners in the league, along there with Keenan Allen. He's a big-bodied dude, so he can go up and just simply outmatch your DB size-wise. You gotta have a physical corner, a guy who can really keep up with him. And it's just because of his route running, right? These big guys, you don't see them as speed guys, and Adams is not a speed dude, but he has worked on his footwork. And I think the thing is just also, when you watch the Packers offense with him and without him, oh my God, is it different. When Adams is out there, you know Rodgers is going to him, and it's kind of like that Drew Brees, Michael Thomas thing. You know where the ball's going, just can you stop it? And most of the time, you don't stop it. And even though Adams was a bit more hurt this past season, I think was under 1,000 yards and everything, he was still one of the highest graded receivers. He came back. the offense looked just so different without him on the field. I do not know how much longer Aaron Rodgers is going to be able to throw to him, but I assume they're going to make the most of their time that they have left together. So I got Devontae Adams at number 6. At number 5, I have Tyreek Hill. Now, Tyreek Hill is a home run threat. Since entering the league, he has 17 touchdowns of 50 yards or more. That by far leads the NFL. And he does everything, right? They will run the ball with him. They'll throw the ball with him. They'll put him back as a returner. It doesn't matter. And there's a lot of guys who still believe that he is more of a returner rather than a receiver, that he's just more of a gadget guy. I want people to understand this. The last time that he started all 16 games, he had 87 catches for about 1,500 yards and 12 touchdowns. And he was graded the 7th best receiver that year. 87 catches, 1,500 yards, and 12 touchdowns. The last time that he started and played all 16 games. This guy is a receiver through and through. He has really kind of shattered the mold of the idea that you have to be a big-bodied receiver to be a number 1 receiver. No. Tyreek Hill is like 5'9", 5'8", whatever it might be. Like 180 pounds, something like that. Maybe close to just about 200 flat. I mean, this guy, he is not huge, but he is muscular, and he is fast as hell. He's the fastest guy in the league, and you better be ready, because he will make you he'll make you look old. You could be in your 20s, he will make you look old, because he will blow by you. Tyreek Hill is by far an elite receiver, and people need to give him the respect. I have him at number 5. Now at number 4, and I feel like this is going to make some people angry, but I have Odell Beckham Jr. Now, last year was terrible. We're not going to deny that, right? He had 1,000 yards. He did have 1,000 yards. He did make it onto the NFL's top 100 players list, but if you were going to base it off this last season, I don't know what I think about that. But last year was terrible, right? We can all acknowledge that. The Browns, in general, completely underachieved. Freddie Kitchens was a terrible head coach. He was in way over his head. The play calling wasn't good anymore. The protection wasn't good anymore. It really affected Baker, which affected the receivers. It just wasn't good. But we are not going to act like in 2018 he wasn't graded as the 4th best wide receiver. That he looked like his old self. He was the 2nd best wide receiver as a rookie. As a true rookie. For the last 6 years, he has an 84 plus grade, okay? And keep in mind who his quarterbacks were. This is kind of an Allen Robinson thing. His quarterbacks have been Eli Manning and Baker Mayfield. Now, yes, Eli Manning has the 2 Super Bowls, but Eli Manning has never been an elite quarterback. In the playoffs, yes, sure, he is an elite quarterback in the playoffs, but in the regular season, he is average. He's another guy who was a turnover machine, led the league in interceptions 3 times. The difference between Eli Manning with Odell and without Odell was shocking. Odell made people think that Eli Manning still had it. With Baker Mayfield, obviously his first year there was not good. I'll wait to see what's going on with this coming season, but I really think he has kind of had an Allen Robinson effect. He's just made more of it, more use of it than Allen Robinson, because I think he's just better than him. Since 2014, I want people to keep in mind, since 2014, he ranks 9th in catches, 6th in yards, tied for 3rd in touchdowns, 4th in yards per game, and he has 5 1,000-yard seasons. Oh yeah, and by the way, he has missed 17 regular season games. He has literally missed a season of games, and those are still his rankings. Odell Beckham Jr. is one of the best receivers in the league when he's right and healthy, and when the team is just competent. When just the protection, when just anything is just competent. And even with the Giants, right, their protection wasn't really that good at all. But at least they didn't have a dumpster fire of a head coach that didn't even know how to get the plays called, right? They at least made the most of that. Last year with the Browns, they didn't know what the hell they were doing. They should have ran the ball more, but sometimes they didn't. They should have play action more, but at times they didn't. Odell Beckham is by far a top 5 receiver talent-wise, in production-wise, he might not be that, but the fact that he ranks where he does in all those categories and he's missed 17 career games is insanity to me. So I got Odell Beckham Jr. at number 4. I am sure some people are upset with that. And number 3, I have Michael Thomas. Since entering the league in 2016, this is how he has ranked in his career. 6th, 2nd, 2nd, and 3rd. So since entering the league, he's been a stud. He is the reason Brandon Cooks got traded away from the Saints. Because Sean Payton and everyone there saw, this guy can play. Like this guy, he's not a joke. He can actually play. And Michael Thomas since then, he has shattered the catch record for a receiver in their first 4 years. He broke the single season catch record held by Marvin Harrison. He has been just phenomenal. His grade has never fallen below an 86 by Pro Football Focus. Yes, he is a bit slower, but he's 6'3". He runs outstanding routes. He has some of the most sure hands in football. Everyone knows when you face the Saints, Michael Thomas is going to get 12 to 15 targets. And most of the time, he comes down with 9 of them. He is ridiculous. And he was another kind of a late round pick. I think he was a 2nd round pick. Either a 2nd or 3rd round pick by the Saints. And he was another guy who was just an absolute steal of a draft pick. And he became the highest paid wide receiver ever by the Saints at $20 million a year. Signed a $100 million contract extension with the team. Michael Thomas is absolutely insane. And the reason why I just don't have him though at number 1 or number 2 is simply because of really his speed. I prefer a faster guy, and I think that there are some faster players in the league who kind of give me what Michael Thomas can. And I'll get into that here in just a second. But here's what's crazy, right? So his catches per year have gone 92, 104, 125, 149. And that's going in order from his rookie year to his senior year, you could basically say. 92, 104, 125, 149. 3 of his 4 years, he has 19 touchdown grabs. So he is also a touchdown machine. Michael Thomas is outstanding. And I have him at number 3. At number 2, I have DeAndre Hopkins. I want to tell you guys some of the quarterbacks that DeAndre Hopkins has had throwing to him, alright? I think you're going to be blown away by this. And how many of you even know these names? Ryan Mallett, Tom Savage, TJ Yates, Brock Osweiler, Brandon Weeden, Brian Hoyer. All of those guys came before Deshaun Watson. 2015, I believe, was probably DeAndre Hopkins' finest season. He had 111 catches, 1,500 yards, and 11 touchdowns. His quarterbacks that season were Brian Hoyer, Brandon Weeden, TJ Yates, and Ryan Mallett. He caught passes from all 4 of them that year. All 4 of them. It was insane. And yet he still, I think, made first team All-Pro that year, had over 100 catches, 1,500 yards, and 11 touchdowns. How was that even possible? The last 3 years, he's been ranked the 4th best, 1st best, and 5th best receiver. In 2015, by the way, he was the 4th best receiver by Pro Football Focus. He had a season with 0 drops. He had over 100 catches and 0 drops. I think that was in 2018. That is crazy. He has some of the most sure hands in football right now. He's a 4-time Pro Bowler, 4-time All-Pro. He's only missed 2 games in his entire career. DeAndre Hopkins is a stud, and I think that it was stupid of the Texans to get rid of him. I think they made it harder for Deshaun Watson, but I think it also shows they want to pay Deshaun Watson, and Hopkins' contract, maybe it was getting in the way of it a bit. Don't quite understand picking up David Johnson in that trade. I thought you could have at least gotten more for DeAndre Hopkins. But, they traded him for David Johnson, like a 2nd round pick. Was not a great deal, in my opinion. I think that the Cardinals are going to use him spectacularly. And I think that Kyler Murray is going to be a very happy man this coming season. And at number 1, I have Julio Jones. All-decade Julio Jones. It was he ended up making the all-decade team, which he rightfully should have. Since 2012, his grade hasn't been below an 80. His Pro Football Focus rankings since 2014 go 4th, 1st, 3rd, 2nd. He's 6'3", 220, runs a 4.3. Since 2014, he has 618 catches. He averages, over the last 6 years, since 2014, he has averaged 103 catches a year. He stays healthy. He has only missed 14 games since 2014. And I think this guy has some of the most ridiculous catches. I remember watching the Super Bowl, him in Atlanta, Matt Ryan's running to his right, throws the ball downfield, and Julio Jones made such an insane toe tap grab on the sideline, and that was while having, I believe, turf toe. I mean, it was just insane to watch. Julio Jones is one of the most underutilized receivers, though, I have ever seen. His touchdown numbers are so low every single year compared to how many balls he gets thrown and how good of a receiver he is. And I don't think that has anything to do with Julio. I think that has everything to do with the Falcons and how they choose to call plays. Matt Ryan, who he chooses to target in the end zone. They usually do put more coverage towards Julio Jones, so I guess it's understandable. But I also think it says a lot about Julio Jones and his unselfishness. You've never heard an NFL player say Julio Jones is selfish or a trash talker or anything. Julio Jones is about team. He wants to win. He's quiet. He just goes out there and works. He is still one of the fastest receivers in the league. I remember when he dropped 300 yards on the Panthers. Remember the year after they let go of Josh Norman? Julio Jones completely ate their defense for lunch. I think he's the best receiver in the league, hands down. Yes, he's 31. He is closer to the end of his career than the beginning. I'm going to be very upset when he does retire. But for right now, I'm enjoying him. I think he is the best in the league. And if you even, during the top 100, Larry Fitzgerald was talking to Kyler Murray in a clip they show, in which he was looking at Kyler and was like, Julio Jones is the best receiver I've ever seen in my life. I've never seen anyone better. Julio Jones is the man. And he is. Julio Jones is nothing but consistent and a hard worker. He puts up ridiculous numbers. He has such insane catches. Pro Football Focus loves him. I love him. The fans love him. Julio Jones is insane to me. And I have him as my best receiver in the league. So I'll go and reiterate my top 10. I have Jarvis Landry, Allen Robinson, Mike Evans, Keenan Allen, Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, Odell Beckham Jr., Michael Thomas, DeAndre Hopkins, and, of course, Julio Jones. Again, I will cover the top 10 in my next upcoming podcast. I'll have a whole reaction to that, and my top 10 list. That podcast will be based off of the outcome of the final 10 and where it is that they ranked everybody, so I'll have that reaction and everything for my next podcast. But anyways, thank you for listening to the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps us out. Also, if you can, please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you, everybody, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.